Hey everybody, what is up? It is Dr. Vibe, the host of the Good Men Project Show. Yes, it is now called the Good Men Project Show, and we are very happy to be with all the people who are watching this either live or at a later date via YouTube. And as always, like to say you're blessed and highly favored, magnet for miracles and a solution for someone's problem. I am your host. I am the host of the Good Men Project Show, and I'm also the co-producer along with Marie Roker-Jones of the Good Men Project Show. And we have another great guest tonight, Dale Thomas Vaughn, and he's quite the guy. He's the president of the Global Center for Healthy Masculinities, and also he has his writing and workshops have focused on men's groups, leadership and mentorship, and the bystander intervention method of sexual violence protection. But most importantly to us tonight who are watching this, he's the editor of Leadership at the Good Men Project. So we're going to have a great conversation about men, mentorship, leadership tonight with Dale Thomas Vaughn. So welcome to the Good Men Project Show, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Excellent. Dale was saying before we went on live that he was excited all week about this. I've been jacked since Marie and I were thinking about having Dale on a little while back, so we're fired up and jacked about having him on the show tonight. So Dale, if you can give a little bit more background on yourself for our listeners and viewers tonight.
Sure, yeah. I got into men's work basically 12 years ago when I helped start a fraternity that was sort of a new model for the fraternity world at college. And that model did not have any hazing or any alcohol in the house, and was much more interested in making men better through the college years. And during that time, I ended up in a position in that fraternity where I was teaching, peer mentoring the guys around me about what it meant to be a good man. And I found myself studying harder for that made-up, completely extracurricular activity than any class I took during college. And I realized that I had something, that I had a passion there. And I haven't stopped. Ever since then, I've led, I guess, more than 200 now at this point, workshops for men, a lot of peer mentorship, a lot of protege to elder mentorship programs as well. And it's all been focused around sort of men and how men initiate themselves into manhood and become what they want to be in their lives. And I've had just incredible opportunities to be in people's lives and help them realize their potential. And along the way, of course, I got to learn tons of things. So I'm at the place now where about a year ago I started working with the Good Men Project as an editor, and I have seen that site. We have been taking off. If you are not paying attention to the Good Men Project, get on board, man. This is a good time.
Excellent. So, how did you find out about the GMP, though?
I've known about basically since the beginning, I've known about the Good Men Project. I had a website about the same time that the GMP started up called nextgent.com, and I was very much involved in that early content phase of Masculinities online. And I think the Good Men Project has done a really good job of popularizing the concept. I'm really saying, this is a conversation we have to have. It's not necessarily that there's an answer we need to give. It's a conversation we have to have. And I think that's really important. So.
Well, one of the things we want to focus on tonight, and just ironically, you just happened to write an article today about, grown men need mentorship too. How did that article come about?
Well, I had a chance to sit down, and I've been working with men personally. I have a mentorship program called Empower Mentorship, and I work with men independently and also in groups. And one of the things that kind of comes up is this cross-the-board realization as men that we are missing mentors. Like there's a dearth in mentorship in men, and one of the things I think attributes to that is the realization that we're supposed to only have mentors when we're young, or that there's this idea that if you're a man now and you want to go and mentor somebody to pass on your knowledge, you sort of inherently go to the younger men. You go to like high school or middle school. That's where the mentorship programs are set up, And I think what we're seeing now, and I realize this in my work, is that grown men are longing to have those great mentorship relationships to help us out in areas where, maybe our grandfathers or our great-grandfathers did before, and now that isn't quite as the same setup. So I think I started to sit down to write this article, and it was hoping to help men realize that not only do they need it, but they can easily attain it. If you want to, to go get yourself a mentor, it starts with that. It starts with knowing that I want to get myself a mentor, the passion of your life. So go ahead. I think you're muted.
There we go. Sorry about that. Sorry. No. So you picked a person to sit with in regards to this conversation, you based this article. Why did you choose that person?
Well, she's got a great last name, Kim Wise. It's a great start. She's the head of a company called Mentor Resources, and she does one of the more scientifically based mentorship pairing and mentorship training programs for corporations, for organizations, big entities, big groups. And I was curious about what it would take to systemize mentorship across the culture. Because as I've said, I noticed that there was a dearth of mentorship among our culture. So what would it take to systemize that? And I started looking at people who might have that answer. And Kim had some great answers, I think, about how, it's important to be mindful of the matching process. And I think a lot of people in the old model of mentorship, you would walk into a company and maybe one or two people would have a mentor in the company, and those people would have incredible relationships and benefit from those, but everyone else was sort of missing out. In a culture now where you have companies that have 5, 10, 100,000, 200,000 employees, I mean, if you were a giant company like, say, Disney, where would you find your mentor? And I think that's where somebody like Kim Wise comes in and says, here's an across-the-board mentorship program. I work with small groups of men and singular sort of independent guys, but Kim had a really different perspective on all that, and I think she did a really great job of summing that up.
Good stuff. So let's, I guess, enlarge the conversation piece here. In regards to grown men needing mentorship, you've dealt with hundreds of men.
Mm-hmm. Thousands.
Yeah, thousands. And congratulations to that and your continued work and continued success in that. Are you seeing common themes from the grown men that you're talking about when it comes to lack of mentorship? I'll start with there and how much they're yearning for the lack of mentorship, sorry.
Yeah, I think it belies a deeper longing, actually, which is to know what you want from your life. And I think I always say there are 3 asks when you start to, when you want a mentor in your life. First of all, you have to decide you want a mentor, but in order to then get one, you have to have 3 asks. And the first ask is, what are you asking of yourself? What am I willing to give? What do I want to give of myself? What do I want for my life? What are the things I am willing to put out there? And that asking of myself of what I want and what I want to give is something that I think a lot of men feel ashamed to do. There's sort of I have to line up, go to work, make the money, come home, help my community in whatever little ways I can, but in that process, have I thought about what it is I actually want? And I think that's challenging, first of all. And then the second thing I say men need to ask is, of the universe or God or whatever your sort of larger construct is, what are you asking to receive? What are you asking for the world to sort of set up for you? What are you asking your network in a way to set up for you? And then the third ask is, what are you actually going to ask a real person to do for you? And that's where you can get a mentor. I think those are things that men have in common. I think it's a challenging thing to realize that it all starts from within. Right? Before I can go and get my great mentor, the Yoda in my life, I have to realize what it is I'm after. And when I do that, then I can start to ask for it correctly. And that's when a mentor can walk into an organizational mentorship program or a one-on-one mentorship program and say, okay, my mentee, my protege, has very clear goals for himself or herself. And as men, I think it's something that we've been lacking across the board.
So there's so many different conversation pieces, and we'll try to. And obviously, I'm speaking. We're going to be back on again and again in regards to this very important subject. Where are men needing to get what is it a fatherhood thing? Because I'm sure that mentorship and fatherhood or fatherhoodness comes into this somehow. How many of these men open up to you and saying, you know, I didn't have a father or a male role model, and I don't like using that term, but someone male in my life to help mentor me?
I think that's real. I think that's real for a lot of men. And, you know, I was fortunate to have a great father and two great, fantastic grandfathers. However, I still need mentors now who are not my father and not my grandfathers. But I think the model that was set up by having a father who was in my life and willing to help me, and you know, as a child, it was learning how to do everything from tying your shoes to playing baseball to how to drive a car to whatever those things are that fathers are supposed to do, you know, theoretically. Having that model set up for me it made it easier for me then to go out now and recruit mentors in my life as an adult. And so there's no doubt that that's a correlative. Among the men who I work with, once those skills are learned, because I think they are learnable, they're patterns. We're great at pattern recognition. We're great at pattern repetition. Once we see a pattern work, we're really good at keeping that up. So with my men, with the guys in my groups, once they see that model, I think it becomes easier and easier to apply that. And so, yeah, I think part of it comes down to, did you have a great father or not? I think that's definitely a leg up that can't be understated. And as fathers, you know, it's a gift we give. You know, that pattern of giving your child a leg up on the world by knowing how to ask for help, knowing where to go for expertise, that's absolutely the leg up that fathers can give. But I don't think that is the only place to learn it. So I want men to know that there's hope, that whether you had a great father or not, there's absolutely hope for you to learn how to build mentorship relationships in your life.
How challenging is society versus male mentorship? I see them sometimes clashing at times because there's still, unfortunately, an expectation that men should be at a certain level and that men a lot of times should be the go-to guys. But a lot of times we don't got the insides to be the go-to guys. We're trying to go to ourselves when
Sure.
other people are getting the ask of mentorship from us. Could you talk about that and share about that?
Yeah, I think, you know, if you watch a lot of the Discovery Channel, you'll see men are fighting with each other all the time. The males of the species are always looking for dominance. And at what point are you willing to accept that some man is greater than you in some aspect of your life? I think there's something animalistic in us that doesn't want to accept that in some ways. And society tells us that we don't really want to be weak, right? We're not allowed to be weak. So if you admit that somebody's better than you in some area of your life, is that admitting weakness? I think that's a fallacy we have to get over. And the men who free themselves from comparison, in other words, if I free myself from comparing myself to a person who's 5, 10, 20 years down the road from me in whatever skill set I'm talking about, like let's say it's sales. You know, I work at a company where I have to make sales. I would like to have a mentor who's 10 years down the road and understands how to work this market better and knows how to do the sales in that market. Well, if I admit he's better than me, am I making myself weaker than him? And if I free myself from that comparison and see maybe that we're on the same team, or that I'm not in competition with him, I'm in competition with myself, then I can see his track as something I can use, and I can see his 20/20 hindsight as something valuable for my blurry future. I think that's something we get into as men, is like, how do I take the next step in my life if I don't know what it looks like? That's where a mentor can come into a really good play for you. You look at their hindsight, because if I look at hindsight, it's clear. If I look at foresight, it's blurry. So just use somebody else's hindsight, and you're doing better right away.
I think one of the challenging things when it comes to mentorship for people in general, but especially for a number of men, is asking for help.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's a big challenge. Can you address on that?
Sure. When I have guys in my program, you know, we talk about asking for help does not mean that you're any worse than you were the second before you asked for that help. It simply means that you need some help. And so we start to go, okay, look, if I were learning how to sail a sailboat, and I were just getting on a sailboat for the first time, and some guy stepped up to the helm, and he was, 60 years of having sailed a boat, why wouldn't I ask for his help? It's actually not logical. It doesn't make sense for me not to ask for help. And so in the most masculine sense of things, if I want to be the greatest, if I want to, if I want to be free and independent and autonomous, the best way to do that is to ask for help. It's paradoxical, but the more I learn from somebody, the better I get at whatever that skill is quicker. So, like, in other words, accelerating your process to where you don't need to ask for help, the easiest way to do that is to ask for help.
Good stuff. Good stuff. In regards to mentorship movement for men, you have been involved with it for a number of years.
Mm-hmm.
You're still young, which is outstanding. A number of different conversation pieces. At the beginning of our conversation, you said you've done mentorship for a wide range of men of various ages. How are you able to relate to men who are older than yourself, and you're still a young man? And I'm not saying you can do, but I think it's a very interesting situation how you can get that relatability with gentlemen who are older than yourself.
No, it's a really good question. I have guys in my group who are in their 60s. I have guys in my group who are also in their teens. I've worked with everything in between. And, there's that thing of, like, if you're truly wise, you know what you don't know. And I think that's what I aim to be. I aim to know what I don't know. So in a situation where I'm with a 60-year-old guy and we're working through something in his life, some project in his life, or some area of his life he wants to improve, I don't necessarily have to know more than him. A lot of what I do as a mentor is mirror, is bounce back your own wisdom. I always say, I don't know anything you don't. All I'm doing is helping you rediscover something you forgot. If you have ever learned anything in a group setting especially, but if somebody's ever taught you anything, it never feels like it's brand new, right? You don't get the light bulb moment like it came from outside of you. It feels like whatever you just learned came from inside of you. Like you're just remembering it. Like, oh yeah, I remember that. I knew that. I already knew that. How many times have you read a book by somebody who's brilliant and they get to their main thesis or their main point, you read it and you go, oh yeah, I already knew that. So I don't think that I am ever going to teach a 60-year-old man more about life than he already knows. But that by itself means that I'm free to be a better mentor. And I think if we realize that, you can learn something from somebody who's 15 just as easily as 60. And I have mentored guys, boys, I guess you would call them, in middle school and high school. And I'm surprised every time I go at how much wisdom just flows from these young men's minds and mouths. And I feel like if I'm open to receiving that kind of wisdom from somebody who's young, who's 15 years younger than me, then I hope that men are going to be able to receive the wisdom I am also going to stumble upon if they're 15 years older than me. So I think age is sort of irrelevant in a way if you're open to receiving new perspective and to opening up to your own wisdom.
Nice. And I'm going to continue on about this journey and how long you've been on this journey. How has the world of male mentorship or men mentorship changed from the time you got started to where you're at right now?
Oh, that's a good question. When I was just starting this out, I guess this was probably 12, 13 years ago, I started out doing this work. Nothing like the Good Men Project existed. There really wasn't a clearinghouse for this kind of conversation. There were very few published authors in this space, so you might have had some of the mythopoetic guys, some of the Iron John by Robert Bly, The Fire in the Belly by Sam Keane. I don't even think The Way of the Superior Man was out at that point. I don't think, there were some academic texts. In other words, I think that it was still very fringe to be talking about masculinity in a context of we need to learn more about it. And in fact, in 2012, I had Gloria Allred on my podcast, and she is the famous feminist attorney of many, many civil rights and feminist lawsuits. She's just this brilliant activist. I had her on my podcast, and we were talking about masculinity, and I actually asked her, do you think we need to study masculinities as much as we study femininity in the gender studies context? And she actually didn't know what that meant. She actually asked me, what does it mean to study masculinity? And that was in 2012. So I think in a relatively short amount of time, we've come to the point where having a conversation about what it means to be a man is relevant. And if you look at the Good Men Project with over 100,000, and I don't even know what we're at now, likes on Facebook, you know, that sort of solidifies that this is a relevant conversation. This is something that we can do now in a larger sense. I think the 100 monkey concept, where if a bunch of people start doing it in one area, start talking about what it means to be a good man in one area, then that will flow over to another area, and there will be all of these necessarily complementary conversations going on. And since I began, it's a world of difference. You know, you can go out there and find a mentor now pretty much anywhere in the world. And the internet has definitely sped that along. What we're doing right now, you know, this over the web thing, where we can actually see each other face to face and have a real life conversation. I've helped people across the internet that I never could have reached 10 years ago, and who never could have reached me 10 years ago. So I think we're in a golden age of what it means to be a man. I think we're in a turning point of how we can reinvent that, and I think mentorship is a key piece to that puzzle.
You were so eloquent in what you mentioned about what men should be looking for if they want to get mentorship or receive mentorship, and I mentioned about asking for help. Are men that you encounter more willing to give now than before?
Yes. Oh, thank you for asking that question. That is one of the things I hear from every guy is I love giving my wisdom. I love being a part of the elder model. I want to be an elder. I want to help guys, whether that's 5 years younger than me or in a peer model, sort of peer mentorship model. I want to help other guys. That's clear. We are great at being on a team, right? If you give 12 guys a ball, you'll divide up into 2 teams and play team sports. Like, nobody's going to stand around and play a 12-person singular game. We love being on a team together. So once this has gotten going and more culturally acceptable, I see men coming out of the woodwork to be a part of mentorship. And, you know, if I know you've been a part of this, giving is the greatest gift. I can't be more happy than when I'm giving as a mentor. I just can't be. I never want to not do that. And I see a lot of men really are longing to be in those situations, which is where I think when you ask men to be a part of something like a mentorship program of any age, those guys who, you know, those gray-haired guys, they come into my program and they're excited about getting something, but they're also just as excited about giving something. That's a great thing to see.
Now, in your journey too, how are the men that you're encountering now different than the men you encountered even up to 5 years ago?
I think in general we're all more open to redefining masculinity sort of culturally and regionally and among even our small peer groups, whereas, you know, I think we've divided up and we're not quite as big of a mass market as we used to be. The advertisers would like to believe that we're sort of one category, right? Men over the age of 18 or over the age of 25 are all the same. And I don't think that's true anymore. I think men have more of an opportunity now to redefine themselves for themselves. They understand that it's a cultural concept. So what I see is that men are opening up to, you know what, I not necessarily am I going to do the pendulum swing all the way to one side, but I can definitely open up about, you know, understanding myself in different ways. And I don't have to be Rambo, you know, I can be a different kind of what it means to be a man, and I think that's valuable. I think you're muted again, sir.
No problem. What has happened to that image of Rambo that you just mentioned? Does that still exist, or is it basically a gonzo thing these days?
I think Rambo has evolved in 30 years, obviously. But there was a great piece on Grantland recently, a couple months ago, about how the action hero has evolved, and the action hero who has really been winning the contests of the sort of action hero lately is Liam Neeson, who has had kind of a career, you know, revolution in that he's in his 60s now, and he's the guy who's kicking butt and taking names, right? And I think that change is an interesting phenomenon to see that on our screens. Yeah, you've still got the sort of Fast and Furious model, and you've still got the superhero model for sure. But I think we're seeing that even the action hero is evolving to be a little less, you know, roided out young guy who kills things and doesn't know how to talk about his feelings. You know, here's a guy who Taken is the most famous of Liam Neeson's new things and on screen, and he's trying to, in another way, be a good father. In his way, he's trying to help his daughter not be molested, and I think that's like, in a way, that's a big shift from who we were in the 80s as men. And you know, I wonder what it will be like in 30 years. I wonder what we will see as the cultural concept of masculinity as, you know, in 30 years. I think that'll be a really interesting thing to watch.
What, in regards to mentorship, are you seeing from younger men in their teens and early 20s, maybe to their late 20s? What are you seeing from them? Because we have focused probably predominantly about men in their 30s and up, but what are you seeing from young men that you're dealing with under 30? I look at two different markets, the under 30 market and the over 30 market. Where are the differences when it comes to mentorship in the under 30 market for men?
Well, these guys are hip, first of all. They're a lot more aware than, again, and the media makes them out to be. I think not only having a ton of information to go through has made them sort of more, in a way, necessarily aware, but also because there's so much to sift through, they've been seeking out mentors sort of naturally to help them sift through the wheat from the chaff, right? And I think I see guys who are the millennial generation, which I guess I'm sort of just at the cusp of, and younger. Those guys are, they crave this, they know they need it, they know they want it. They're, you know, if you go and you look at Google keywords, mentorship is really high in that category. Those guys are really looking forward to having their Mr. Miyagi, having their Yoda, having their whatever that looks like. And it's across the board. I really haven't been in a group of guys who are younger than 30 who were not keenly aware of what they could get from a mentor and keenly aware of their role in society as a young man and reshaping what it means to be a man. I think that's a really encouraging sign when the young guys are on board like that. And in a lot of ways, those young guys, those millennials and younger, are learning at a faster rate than us. and in a few years, you know, they're going to be taken over.
So here's a situation I see here. You have these younger men that are yearning for mentorship from older men.
Sure.
You still have a lot of older men that are trying to, whether it's finding themselves or still yearning for mentorship. How can we bring these two groups together?
Well, what's beautiful about it is age is a little bit irrelevant in self-development, because self-development is sort of timeless. Like, if you get into self-development and start to work on yourself, you're only playing against yourself. There's nobody else sort of around you. It's a very self-oriented work, and it's important that it is. And because that's true, a guy who's 25, who's spent 10 years working on this stuff, will have a decade of experience. Whereas a guy who is 65, who just retired and hasn't spent a day working on self-development because he's been too busy working to feed his family, is just getting started. So in a way, he's a rookie, and the kid who's 25 has 10 years of experience in this. So self-development has its own age, its own sort of timelessness to it. And I think that what I see happening is guys in their 60s come in and they've got experience about things in hindsight, like I wouldn't do that again, I would do that again, these are the things I would prefer I would have done, things like that. That's invaluable information. And then you've got young guys coming in who are saying, I know I don't want to do things like that because I have listened enough, I have paid attention enough. And so they're already not making those mistakes. And what would a life be like if you knew the pitfalls ahead of time and started to avoid them? I think we're seeing that with this younger generation. Of course, everybody is different and everybody has their own journey, but if I were going to paint people with a broad brush, I would say mentorship as a model has been ageless in my experience.
Good stuff. What in your opinion makes a good male mentor?
I asked everybody to create their own mentor job description. In other words, to set out what they want from a mentor. Like if I want a mentor, it has to be specific to what is going to fit for me. So I don't need a mentor who's constantly chewing on me, who's going to be in my ear, sort of coaching me. I need a mentor who is available when I call, but is busy. Like he's ahead of the game in his world. I think it's important for men who want to be a mentor to realize that consistency is the most sort of important role that they can provide for men. If I wanted to mentor a younger man, it actually does him damage, and this has been proven. It does men damage if you are a mentor for a short period of time instead of a long period of time. In other words, if I show up to do a mentorship program for a high school group of boys and I don't show up next month, I have then shown them a model of what it's supposed to be a good man, which is to not show up. So your consistency as a mentor is really important. In general, I think that's the biggest key. Everything else is sort of negotiable between the two people or between the group, among the group.
Right. Do you find your approaches to mentorship different? And I don't know, maybe I'm presuming here. Do you do, obviously I've seen through your website, different men of different cultures. Is it different, your approach?
Yeah, I mean, that has to be taken into account, I think, but only so far as I have the ability to empathize. So in other words, I realize that there are certain cultures I'm never going to be able to fully understand myself. At that point, it's my job to help those men in those situations come to terms with being vulnerable, sort of the universal traits, come to terms with being vulnerable, with communication, with how to know themselves, and how to use the skills that we can develop as mentors to then affect their own lives and their own cultures. Right? I'm never going to walk into your life in Toronto and know what it even means to be Canadian, much less any other race than what I am. Right? So it would be silly of me to presume that. But I think as a mentor, the way that I work is, you bring in whatever it is you want to work with. You bring it in whatever skills you already have, and we work with those. We work with your strengths. And those are, in a way, sort of culture not specific. So.
Understood. No, I think men right across the board, when we were having this conversation before we went live, there are certain core competencies that most men have. So I think that's a very important point. Well, as we wind down here, I just want to say, first of all, thank you very much for sharing some time with us tonight. Do you have any final thoughts and words when it comes to the area of men and mentorship for our audience?
Well, I would say if you're a man and you think that there's anything in your life that might use some improving, like maybe I could be just a little bit better in an area of my life, consider, could I ask somebody to help me get better? We think we have to go it alone, and the truth is, if we were meant to be alone, we'd be the only person on the planet. There are people around you. Ask for help.
I agree. Good stuff. No, I share with a lot of people that it took two people for you to get in the world. So right from the beginning of time, you didn't get here by yourself, right?
Amen. Yep.
Absolutely. So if people want to get in touch with you, what are the best ways they can, Dale?
Yeah, I'm at empowermentorship.com. That's empowermentorship.com. And I'm also available at the Global Center for Healthy Masculinities. That's healthymasculinities.org.
And they also can get you the Good Men Project too.
At the Good Men Project, I'm there all the time. And Twitter, I'm at NextGent. And I'd love to have a conversation with you guys.
Excellent. Well, Dale, really like to thank you for taking the time out of your positive, productive schedule to be on the Good Men Project show. We're wishing continued success, and definitely people who are watching or listening to this, check it out. He writes a lot of great stuff, and I've become a fan in a very short period of time. It's Dr. Vibe here. I'm your host and co-producer of the Good Men Project show. I'm co-producing along with Marie Roker-Jones, and big thank you to Marie for getting all this together. And as always, check out the Good Men Project at thegoodmenproject.com, having the conversations that no one else is having. Look forward to seeing you next month, and definitely follow us on Twitter, follow us on Facebook, Google+, Instagram. We're out there. We want to hear your conversations from a man's perspective, and even the ladies who have stuff to say about men, we want you to. As always, take care, be well, and keep the faith. Bye-bye.